You thought that they had disappeared forever, but this is the moment we've all been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, the Four Horsemen.
The Girl Horsemen. Woo! Yeah! Nope.
Welcome to the next Real Film Board on rashpixel.fm, everybody. Each month, our gang of thugs gathers to take on a movie just opening in theaters and spoil that film rotten. Tonight in the show, we're going to peek behind the curtain of John Chu's Now You See Me Too. I'm Pete Wright. Joining me around the table, we have handcuffed and sinking to the bottom of a dry Phoenix River bread. It's Steve Sarmento.
I'll be with you in just a moment. Let me just pick my way out of this safe.
Hijacking a secure vault with nothing more than the power of his mind and his hat. It's Andy Nelson.
That's right, and I'm trying to learn how to throw cards in really cool ways.
And in what can only be described as a coincidence fit for the ages, I can't believe I get to say hello to our first girl horseman. Crazy. Welcome to the show, Alice Baker.
Thank you so much for having me. And that's right. I'm putting my hands up. First girl. Hello, girl horseman.
Crazy.
Come on, guys.
There you go.
Alice is co-host and co-founder of the Educating Geeks team at educatinggeeks.com. Fantastic podcast that finally pushed me over the edge to binge Orphan Black, Alice.
Oh, very good.
Such a good show.
Isn't it? Well, how far are you? Okay, we're digressing already.
I'm in season 2 now. I'm like 3 or 4 episodes into season 2.
Okay.
But I did season 1. I came up, I got the bends. I watched it so fast.
Yeah, that first season is nearly perfect. It's so good.
She is stunning. Tatiana Maslany. She's amazing.
Robbed of every award.
Yes, because she should be in everything. Anyway, tell us, what do you want people to know about the Educating Geeks network of shows? You do great
network
stuff.
Of shows. Thank you so much. Well, our hook over at Educating Geeks is we don't revoke people's geek cards. We like to welcome people into things that we're crazy excited about. So we always find at least one person, sometimes more than one person, that hasn't seen something, read something, read it, played it, whatever. And then we get a bunch of super geek fans on, and we all get together and talk about whatever that piece of content was. And I always find the conversation really interesting to hear, something, I'm old, so all, 80s stuff, when somebody watches Blade Runner for the first time and they're like, and I'm like, what? And that conversation, I find that really interesting. And so we have a lot of that happen on the show.
Excellent. Well, we are thrilled to have you bring your insights to this conversation, especially because in the email exchange that started with our inviting you, your comment was, I believe, something to the effect of, so I listened to your show on Now You See Me, the first one, and I have to ask, why are you doing this? and you would be right. The film board reviewed Now You See Me on June 3rd, 2013. And, for the most part, we trashed it. It sits at number 42 right now out of 46 movies on our flick chart for this show. And in fact, we wouldn't be talking about it at all if it were not for our colleague, Justin, JJ, who lobbied hard to get the second film in the franchise on our docket for this year. And so, mostly because our review predate his participation. And I think he's been talking about it since he joined, about how he wants to just take a whack at it. And it is a tragedy of personal events that he can't actually be here on the show to defend his position. And here we are once again, to see where it lands. Anyway, I'm going to say, I watched this film again, the first one, with my kids this weekend to get ready for number 2. And you won't find anyone more surprised than me to note that my own opinion has softened. The film was actually better on repeat viewings. I still have a lot of challenges with it, but it was more fun this time around, and it made me actually a little bit excited to see number 2. So I'm anxious to see how the first movie has aged with you guys, and to see if the new movie scored any new points, or if it belongs somewhere below the first. So initial comments, Steve, would you kick us off? How did number 2 hit you?
It's all smoke and mirrors. There was little substance, and it's really a diminished reflection of the original.
Probably a predictable start. Andy?
I think I liked it a little more than Steve did. It was the original was nonsense, and I had a lot of problems with it. This one I also have a lot of problems with. However, I did feel that they added some new characters to this one that actually I ended up enjoying those elements that they added to this, and it didn't save the movie, but I did find that it was more fun than the original. Again, I'm not sure if that's saying a whole lot, but I would say so far I think I actually enjoyed this more than number 1. But I haven't gone back and watched number 1 again. Haven't really had the itching to.
Yeah,
so.
Just say it.
Glad you did that for me.
Yeah, you're not going to. All right, Alice, here you go. What do you think? Initial comments.
Well, so obviously I wasn't on the first podcast, but as I at least emailed Andy, I actually fell asleep halfway through the first film. And had to get up the next morning and watch it again in preparation of seeing the second one. So my opinion of the first one is not high, although I will be interested to hear from you, Pete. I almost always, I should say, but it's expectation. So once I know that I don't like a film, the second time I see it, I do generally like it better than I did the first time, unless it's just god awful and has no redeeming qualities, because I already know what to expect. So I don't, I hate it less the second time. So I'd be curious to know if you think that might play into a little bit of why you liked it better the second time.
Oh, spoiler, 100% yes. But,
okay,
you may go on.
Okay. But I think I'm in the same camp as Andy, where I still probably laughed out loud in the movie theater at inappropriate times when no one else was laughing, because there are so many ridiculous, not understandable things about the film. But I did enjoy the ride. I didn't fall asleep, and I did enjoy the ride more than I did the first one.
That is a fair and balanced comment. And to your point, I think part of what makes me, part of what really frustrated me about the first movie is that what I wanted is not what they gave me. And so I walked out of that movie extremely disappointed that it didn't meet my expectations. And what I ended up doing the second time around, just knowing what I was going to get, I ended up being able to let go of those preconceptions and actually see the movie for really what it was. It was frivolous. It came off the rails. It was a ride in which you could sometimes look down and just see that there are no rails even to be found. And so this movie, I think, actually, while the first movie was at great odds with itself, not knowing quite what it wanted to be, number 2, actually, for me, it solves some of its predecessor's problems. It creates, for me, a more, at least a more solid sort of premise that even if I don't like the premise, it has one, and I found that was a good thing. Unfortunately, I think it introduces some all new set of problems that I'm not sure it knows what it's doing. The premise of the film, our Four Horsemen are back. They resurface. They are forcibly now recruited by this tech genius to pull off their most impossible heist yet and steal a computer chip from a vault. And they end up doing that thing with all of their flair and panache and brain power of master magicians. So that's the idea, and it takes them all over the world. They start, I believe, in London. They end up in Macau, and it is definitely a global production with global investors. And I think for me, it highlights the incredible value of original IP. I mean, this is one of those things nobody expected there. I think probably even the cast themselves probably didn't expect there to be a sequel to Now You See Me. And here we are. It is a surprise, I think, to them as maybe to us that we're seeing a Now You See Me too.
The first one, it cost $75 million to make the first one. And I think it ended up making like $350 million globally. So, it made a ton of money. And this one cost more. I'll be curious to see if it's able to hold up as well at the box office. But it just really shocked people that first one did so well. And I guess in a large part it is because it's light and fun, and I think that's why the Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic scores are so skewing toward the people who go watch it. They seem to love it, and the the critics seem to not, and it seems to be pretty much on par with this one.
This was the same as the first one, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I think the issue with this, and as far as original IP, I mean, it's great to see them. We're not pulling something from a comic book. It's not from a TV show. We've got these original characters, but I mean, my biggest issue was it seemed to tie itself so much to the first film that we have this title sequence that's to me, it reminded me of like BVS Doge. It's like, how many times do we need to get a credit sequence that gives us the backstory of these characters? And to me, it gave us a quick summarization of the prior film, but it didn't really tell us anything about the characters. And that's what I enjoyed the first one. And I'm with Pete. I saw it again and can accept it for what it is. And it set my expectation for this one, but this one even let me down from those expectations because I came in with a premise of we're going to have lots of magic, and there was a minimal amount of magic. This is really more of a heist film, and there's a great sequence where they pull off a great heist, but what I really loved about the first one was these characters and their magic and them struggling to work together as a team, and they tried to pull that into this one. But for me, there was too much time spent dealing with the themes and plot ties to the first film that there was very little time for what I was hoping to see, which was the Four Horsemen do cool magic tricks, pulling off cons, heists, whatever. And we just didn't get any of that at all. It was a lot of scenes with two characters doing a lot of talking to explain the past and why they were doing things now, and very little magic, performance, the thrill and fun of the first film. I just didn't get that here.
So, as the outsider here, I'm gonna say one of the things that I remember from the first podcast was actually a lot of talk about the magic, and I'm air quoting, the magic in the first film really being a bunch of CGI and not being particularly believable because it was so heavily special effects. And one of the things I actually think that it was more interesting in this film was that most of the magic felt more quote unquote real in some way, and partly because they go out of their way to show you how they did it. So that even if it was CGI, they at least are going to pretend to tell you why it wasn't CGI to make the magic the magic that is in the film feel more real.
They definitely went a little more Penn and Teller with this one, where they kind of, this is how we did all of these tricks. They kind of go and kind of show you so much of it. And, I do appreciate that with this one, because that first one, there were so many, that was one of my biggest problems with that first one, is so many of the magic tricks. It's like, okay, now we're in giant bubbles floating across the crowd. And it just was so nonsensical. I'm like, none of this is all just movie magic. Yes. But actual like magician magic, I just totally didn't buy into it. And sure, this one has some moments like, when Jesse Eisenberg falls into the rain puddle and his body disappears. I mean, it does have some of those moments that are, make me roll my eyes. I'm like, oh, come on. Or when Lizzie Kaplan is magically, making herself appear all over his apartment in completely impossible ways. There are those moments throughout this film. And the card trick thing, when they're flipping the card around with the chip on it, also it was fun to watch, but I was like, oh, this is a little bit of a stretch. But, these movies are a stretch. And so I really struggled with the magic in the first one, and I actually appreciated that this one, like you said, it did feel like they were going out of their way to make it seem a little more realistic this time. And I appreciated the heist element of it more with this one, because the first one was a big heist. It was kind of glossed over with all that fake magic. And this one, I don't know, it ended up feeling a little more fun, even though I still had a lot of those problems with it.
This is really the uncanny valley of on-screen magic, right? Like, this is the benefit of these magic shows. When you go see a live magician, is you want to try to figure it out. And I think seeing it on screen, at least I find I don't trust it immediately because it's on screen. I am prejudiced to believe that there is no way what they are doing on screen is legitimate. So I spent a lot of time today watching all of the behind-the-scenes featurettes that I could find that have been trickling out, or I should say flooding out over this weekend. And I am really surprised to see just how much of the quote magic they are doing, right? The in particular the vault sequence, right? You bring up here they break into the vault and they do it by throwing the card. They get the chip out by throwing the card around in these very flamboyant ways, and so much of that was these characters learning to throw cards, to palm cards, to do these things with their cards that look CG in the film. But when you see them doing it on the behind-the-scenes stuff, it is amazing to me how much they were actually able to do and how gratifying it is to see how good they got in this set of moves they had to accomplish. And yet it's so frustrating that I still don't believe it when I see it on screen. It's still, it is still merged with so many of these fake flying cameras, the CG cameras that couldn't possibly, and we're going to take the essentially the laser scope cam down, Eisenberg's shirt and down his pants as we follow the card down his shirt. I mean, that makes me lose, fall out of trust with all the stuff that they did really well.
Yeah, what I didn't get about that scene, one, it just goes on too long. Like they needed to cut that sequence shorter. It just goes on too long. And two, I didn't, after the first guy does it, he's done, right? So he's done all of his fancy stuff, hiding it from the security guard. And then the security guard is finished with him. So why doesn't he just keep the card? Why does he then pass it to the next person who's being felt down by the security guard? Like, they made no sense to me, other than it's a good show and it's a lot of fun. It made no sense to me why that sequence of events was actually occurring for reals. Again, I could appreciate it as a fun scene if they would have shortened it.
Yeah, they each got patted down it seemed like 3 or 4 times. And I know there's there's a point where Atlas, Jesse Eisenberg's character, does something and it catches the guard's eye, so they isolate him and they're going to pat him down, and that made sense. The camera work made it a little disorienting for me to keep track of who was being searched, why, when, and and how many times, because it did feel too long. It was an exciting sequence if they had pared it down a little bit. But really, I thought, okay, how many times do they need to pass this card to each other? Because after once, okay, you pat down, Franco, okay, he's done, get it to Woody. If he's patted down, then you can get the card to any one of them, and it should be fine. But they have to keep flipping it and sliding it across the floor. I felt like it was showing off. Like, here's the fun we could do. And Pete, I'm right with you. When I walked out of the theater, I thought, I really don't know that they were able to actually physically pull that trick off, because it seems like something that would be too easy to do with CGI, and because it is mixed in with those shots that are clearly going to be computer generated, that it casts all doubt about the actor's ability to actually do any of those tricks, which is a shame if they're actually able to physically perform those card tricks.
The trick that ended up feeling the most real, because it felt like the most fake to me in the film, was actually the airplane scene at the end. Like that whole thing felt like they never really took off. Like the whole thing was, I had such a hard time feeling the reality of the plane in the sky and everything. And then of course, once they're chucking them out the plane, I'm like, oh, of course this whole thing is fake. But I'm kind of in on it with them by that point. It almost surprised me that Michael Caine and Daniel Radcliffe and everyone else actually believed that the plane took off, because it just felt so fake to me. And
that's going to be the plot of Now You See Me 3, because nobody fools Michael Caine like that and gets away with it. Nobody does that. I actually agree with you, and I think to your point about the card vault sequence was too long. I'm not sure that it was too long, only in one sense, that there is no giant fantastical final trick. The final trick of dropping the walls and they're sitting on essentially a floating set with this airplane is not all that gratifying. Like it is not a resolution that is satisfying for me. It is certainly not as fantastical as the final scene sequence in Now You See Me 1, with all of the 3D projectors on the side of that building and them flying off and turning into money. That was a very dramatic visual, and there is no such dramatic visual in this sequence. And I found that really disappointing, and it made me think, gosh, I'll bet that they really make this card sequence the central giant magic experience, because we don't have very much of that.
No, the one sequence I'm looking forward to is they're in London, they're each showing up in their locations, and Lulu is teasing us with, I'm going to make this huge, ship fly across the air. And it's the one time we see Atlas, Jesse Eisenberg's character, perform a magic trick at all. It's just the one time with the rain. As I recall, he does one trick and that's it. And so they're all we're building up to these great tricks they're going to do. It seems like there's more. And then something happens and they've got to cut it short. And I thought I've been waiting for this whole movie for them to be the Four Horsemen out there performing their street magic in front of the crowds. It was all the thrills that we had in the first film. And then they cut it short. They tease us with things and then they're done. They pulled the carpet out from under us. And I was extremely disappointed because that was what I was coming to this film for.
The script is by Ed Solomon. He was involved in the first one. He has written the screenplay for this one. He was the pen behind the Bill and Ted movies, Excellent Adventure. He's a vet from Gary Shandling Show and Dave Thomas. He wrote Men in Black. Are we feeling the connection that he has given us here? Did it feel like a logical step moving into Now You See Me 2 with the eye as much more of a central premise?
Well, I mean, if you think about it in terms of, gosh, maybe we have a franchise on our hands. How do we give this thing, how do we give it legs? I know, a secret organization that we can send our folks out on missions, almost like a spy movie. Could be James Bond for magicians. I mean, to me, the whole sort of almost moving the film, the mixture of the magic to the heist, and what that mixture was going to be, and making it more about the heist and the double and the triple, the flip, first you think this is where all of the bad guys are, and now you think this is happening, and now we're going to flip it back, and then we're going to flip it back. All of the shift to more of that kind of stuff to me was how do we give this thing legs, and how do we make it go on? Because it does have less magic in it, and it is more heisty. But I did like the writing better in this one, actually. There were a lot of it felt almost 40s comedy for me. There was a lot of very fast back and forth, tete-a-tete. I way preferred Lulu's characterization over Isla Fischer, if I'm remembering that correctly. I liked her. I thought the writing was much snappier for this one than for the first one.
Yeah, the writing stuck with me a little bit better with this one. It's funny, though. That being said, I came into this one. I think I'm probably the only one here who it's been the full 3 years since I've seen the first one. Sounds like everyone else here has seen it pretty recently. I totally forgot the whole thing with Shrike and the backstory connection between Morgan Freeman's character and Ruffalo's character. And so that, when we saw the flashback at the beginning, for me, that was almost like I was, getting that story the first time. So it's kind of funny. I walked into this almost blind. But I think that also said how in the first film, so many of those story elements felt just so disconnected. They were just finding ways to kind of thrust all these things at us that, and finding these forced connections. And even in the first one, my recollection is how by the time we had the big reveal with Mark Ruffalo's character at the end of the film, it felt like they almost wrote it where up to that point, it could have been anybody. And you could have almost dropped in Morgan Freeman or Michael Caine or anybody to be that fifth horseman. And it would have just been as logical as Mark Ruffalo, because it was all nonsense. Here, it felt like they actually worked to tie things together a little more. I don't feel like there was any of that random, just, nonsense of how things connected. This one actually felt like everything was connected. And I felt like the story actually made a little more sense and kind of helped pull that first one into, I don't want to say a logical, place, but at least it felt like things fit a little bit better.
Well, that was the point of our frustration last time, Andy, which was that there is no way for the audience to go back and watch the first movie and be able to piece it all together. And that is one of the most sort of central rewards to these kinds of films when done right, that you miss everything the first time, but once you're slapped in the face with it, you can go back and piece it together and make sense of it. And the first movie did not. It did not, even from structurally, all the way to Ruffalo's portrayal of that character. You can't even go back and say that what he is doing on screen, how he is emoting on screen, makes any sense once you see that he's the guy. It's like he didn't even know he was the guy. That was an example of the filmmakers trying to play a trick on the audience, in my view, you. Like, they played a trick on us, and this is a movie about them trying to play a trick on each other. We're generally in the know most of the time.
No. They pulled the same thing at the very end, where it's like, oh, this whole thing from the beginning, the eye was behind this. And then again, it's, oh, yeah, the Mark Ruffalo's character, Dylan being put in the safe and thrown in the river. Oh, yeah, that was all part of the plan. I'm like, really? Risking this guy's life? It's one of the things that bothers me the most about a film like this, where we are expected to assume that some of these characters have such an in-depth understanding of human nature that they can play everyone like a master chess player to get everybody to act the exact way for this to play out, so that ultimately this endgame resolves itself this way. We get a reveal, which is probably played for laughs, of the head guy at the vault is actually in on it. And I thought, so the eye had a guy on the inside, so we had this whole big heist sequence for what purpose? Right. Because they needed the Four Horsemen to have the card for Daniel Radcliffe. And it's like, so apparently they had such confidence in their ability to manipulate everybody and knew how Michael Caine and Daniel Radcliffe's characters would react, that it would all play to their ultimate endgame. And to me, that's where it just falls apart again. It's the same problem we had with the first one I see with this one.
Yeah, you're right. I abstain. I'd like to annul my final comment.
I mean, when you were saying that, Steve, I was thinking to myself, you mean like what? Like a master magician can, read somebody where they're going to be looking and what they're going to be thinking, and they're doing all this misdirection and playing the ultimate long game. I mean, they set it up that way. I mean, for me in movies all the time, you're either going to be there and suspend your disbelief and roll with it, or you're not, because you can take those same things about what's believable in terms of a storyline and what somebody's motivation is and what somebody can interpret about somebody else's character. And you can look at a ton of movies and that just falls apart, and you have to be willing at some point to let it go or not. I think I agree with you wholeheartedly that in this film, a lot of what you would have to let go if you were going to be there 100%, and completely suspend your disbelief is pretty impossible to do. But, they do in their own little world set that up as things that are actually, possible and doable.
Oh, sure, because you can count on the fact that Jesse Eisenberg's going to put his cell phone down on the edge of that piece so that they can pull his information from it, because the chances of him just actually leaving his cell phone in his pocket are so slim, because you can count pretty highly that he's going to put his phone there so that they can pull the information from it. So I agree. I mean, we can nitpick and we can pull threads, but to the point of, I think the film suffers from some of the similar flaws as the first, that there's something in how it's architected that I think they're reaching a little bit too far for what they're trying to pull off, asking a little bit too much of the audience. And to me, a lot of it comes from the eye and trying to flesh that out a little bit more and tie it back. I would be okay. I was interested to see where they went, because they leave off being part of the eye, joint at the end of the first film. So for this one, I thought, okay, yeah, we're going to see a different side. I avoid trailers as much as I can. So I was really not expecting to see Mark Ruffalo or Michael Caine or Morgan Freeman in this film at all, because I thought it's titled some places online, it's Now You See Me, the second act. So I'm expecting, phase 2, different characters. I wasn't expecting such a strong connection to the first film. And for me, that was part of the problem, that I think those ties back to trying to connect to the eye and how it ties back to Dylan as a kid and Morgan Freeman's relationship with his father was just too much. And I wanted so much more movement forward than looking back to the first.
All of these problems will be solved, Steve, once they finish fleshing out the Now You See Me cinematic universe.
Which I'm sure they hope to do.
Yes.
I'm sure they do.
Does that mean I can expect a standalone film about Chase McKinney?
Yeah. Yes.
Actually, he was an interesting character. There was something that at first I thought, okay, the only way they were going to get Woody to do this film was say, hey, Woody, we're going to get you twice the amount of screen time. You're going to play your twin as well.
With better teeth and hair.
With better teeth.
Well, I'm not sure the teeth were an improvement, actually. No, they actually have 13 episodes spec'd out. It's a serialized comedy that takes place in a Macau magic shop. You're going to love it. They're all thumbs. That's what it's called.
Oh,
coming soon on Netflix.
There you go. You see, I mean, we're just rolling with it. Direction. This is Andy. I am so excited to hear your thoughts on this. I have been looking forward to this for months. Director Jon Chu. We know Jon Chu from many films. G.I. Joe Retaliation, Never Say Never, the Justin Bieber film, Step Up 2, The Streets, and of course Andy's favorite film of all time, Jem and the Holograms.
Well, you might be selling it a little strongly there.
That's what I need to know, Andy, is did this film live up to Jem and the Holograms? That is our central question.
I would definitely prefer to watch Jem and the Holograms again over this. But that's not saying that I thought he did a bad job. I mean, like I said, I actually feel like this one was stronger than the first one. I would prefer to watch this one. I think he had a fun time directing this one. I thought, I will say some of the action sequences were really muddled. I had a really just a hard time figuring out what was going on, like during the motorbike chase. It wasn't even really a chase, motorbike confusion, whatever was going on there. It was kind of an action directorial mess. You couldn't really see who was doing what, where they were spatially. By the time the whole thing was over, I was almost surprised that they were all still pretty much in the same spot that they started in. So
it was terrible. It was that part of the comedy coming out. People, I mean, seriously, that was the worst chase scene ever.
Yeah, it's like they were
The
trying
motorcycle one?
Yes, they all get on bikes and none of them leave.
They can't really get out, I guess was the point, is they were trying to scare the guys to get past them. I couldn't quite figure out what the point of that whole thing was, other than Woody was stuck. But no, I think that Chu directed most of the stuff well, and I think that he did a fair job of putting everything together. Except for some of the action sequences. I just really struggled with those. But despite the problems I have with the way the card and the stealing the chip out of the vault, the nonsensical way that actually played out, like we already talked about, I still think it was directed well. It was a fun scene to watch.
Well, Andy, I agree. I was really surprised. I first became familiar with his work on a little internet series he directed called the LXD, the League of Extraordinary Dancers, which is sort of like dance superheroes. And with all the choreography and visual style to that, I was really expecting some really interesting dynamic things. So I was really surprised. For me, in addition to the motorcycle non-chase, there was the scene where Mark Ruffalo's fighting in the marketplace, and he was fighting a bunch of guys, and for me it was just, again, very muddled as far as how many people were there or where he was. And I know that part of that may have been an attempt to disorient us so that he could pull off some of his tricks that, to fool the guys that are after him, to, get one to run into a window, those things. But for me, I just didn't get a sense of how he was doing these things, where he was, or how many guys were after him. And I was kind of disappointed because I've seen, this director pull off really great action sequences. So I don't know why that was such a struggle. If we look at that heist sequence, there's a card going around and it may run long, but it's visually was easy to track. Again, I don't know why everybody had to be searched so much, but that seemed much more fluid. The others, it was so chopped up and frenetic in its pacing and cutting that it just really was, I don't want to say unsettling, but I guess just really disorienting to me. It was a little disappointing because I felt like either I was losing track of the story, who's got who and who are they chasing and why. And maybe that's just, I couldn't tell if it was solely the editing and direction or if there was also writing that was a problem with that they were trying to get around.
For me, it was like fast action versus slow action. So all the fast action sequences really didn't work particularly well for all the reasons you guys have eloquently pointed out. The quote unquote slower action scenes, like the card scene, like the scene at the very beginning where at the Octo launch, where they're doing the backstage and he's taking off his clothes and they're magically landing exactly where they're supposed to be and she's sawing off her arm and all of that stuff that's more the slow action, those worked okay for me. But the minute things had to move more quickly, he lost me.
For a guy who directs like amazing dance choreography, you'd think that he would really have a good handle on handling those action moments and finding the way to choreograph it and shoot it in a way that really worked well.
The real highlight of his work for me in an action film is actually in G.I. Joe Retaliation. It's the cliffside samurai chase, which I thought was gorgeous. And in a movie that otherwise I don't give a whole lot of thought to, that's a sequence that really sticks with me. And so, I haven't seen his dance movies, and I have heard others say that I should really, for great sort of action dance shots, I should check out the Step Up movies, and his is as good as any. Step Up 2, and I think he did Step Up 3 as well. But I think, Alice, that is a spot on point, that the slower stuff, the stuff that is more akin to dance movement, the just sort of kinesthetic movement, is really strong. It's a strong suit for him, and fight scenes and chase scenes he hasn't mastered yet. But I enjoyed his work here. I mean, I actually had a good time watching. I didn't find myself completely distracted by the fight scene as much as you did, Steve. I felt like Ruffalo actually did pretty well in that sequence. I thought the motorcycle chase, I feel like if I had just been instructed to laugh or not to laugh, I would have been better off. I just didn't know what to do. Was it supposed to be funny or just a mess? Like, I didn't know.
Well, it was Rufio getting to do to other people what Franco's character did to him, right? In the first one, with all the fancy using his sleight of hand skills to fight.
Wait, which you're talking about the Macau street vendor scene.
Yes,
the fight.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
It's his sleight of hand mixed with presumably his FBI training. So it's a mix of those two things.
Which was great, although the cooler sequence for me was the much shorter one when he was initially found out and they arrested him and pushed him up against the risers, and he got himself out of the cuffs and disappeared. In addition to the, always be the smartest guy in the room scene in the first movie, like, those scenes are now really rewarding for me. I get a little rise out of it. Like, I get the chills, when I see that, because I want to be able to magically CGI handcuffs on people. But I really like that, right, from a story point. And I loved that was really rewarding to finally get him to come out to his compatriots and say, okay, I'm not who you thought I was. Now it's time we get to move on to the next chapter, where we're in a world where that I'm one of these guys. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I did too. I do feel like with his character in particular here, they kept kind of pointing out to us that, oh, he's so much more than we thought he was. And the one that just really made me roll my eyes was when Morgan Freeman surprised us with, hey, I speak Mandarin. And then, of course, Ruffalo replies to him in Mandarin. I'm like, oh, of course he does. What can't he do? That to me was a little much.
Your English isn't that good either. We've been doing this thing on the show. Andy, you want to take a crack at first shot, last shot?
Well, I think we have to try to remember exactly what the first shot is. Because in my head, it's the spiral staircase as Morgan Freeman's voiceover kicks in. But I couldn't remember if that happened before or after the flashback to Mark Ruffalo's dad on the banks of the river.
Oh, that's good. Did anybody remember the very first shot of the film?
No.
Well, that's telling.
I think it's the river, because after that we get the title credits, which are really interesting, where we get Morgan Freeman's narration, and that's where I thought we get sort of the believe and lie and all those cool visuals, and then we get that shot of that spiral staircase eye as he's talking about an eye for an eye, and then we go to Atlas working coming down, because it was again a similar sort of spiral shape. But to me, I seem to recall it being that piece with Dylan as a kid on the banks, because I thought, oh, we're going to go to his origin story again, because we got that at the end of the last film. We're going to start with that again.
To your point, though, I think Andy is a great example, not having seen the film in a while. And this was, John Chu said this in the making of stuff. He said, we didn't know what people were going to remember as original IP. We didn't know if people would remember these characters' names, let alone their relationships to one another. And so I feel like they erred on giving more information than less. And I didn't find it troublesome. And in fact, for my younger kid who watched them both, he needed it. Like, even though he'd watched the original movie the night before, he needed to track again what that was. So
sure. And then the last shot, as I recall, is the Four Horsemen coming down the spiral staircase, which as it turns again is that eye shape in that brightly lit white spiral staircase.
Yeah, I don't even think they come down. I think it's just the shot up, and they
just the
will
shot,
look
yeah.
down over the thing. And
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman says exactly the same words
Yes.
that he does earlier.
They do. It seems like they at least lean back off the stairs. So I assume they walk down because I know they're not in the actual eye as it stares down.
Oh, right.
I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it's this the connection to the eye piece I thought was interesting, and maybe now this is, for lack of a better term, we're rebooting the franchise because they're now really part of the eye, whereas they weren't before, but now they are, as we see them coming down the spiral staircase, that they're now going to be part of this organization, that we can now crack the story open wider to see what their role is as part of that. That's what I'm hoping for, because to me, there was so much spinning the wheels story-wise that I feel like now at the end, we're starting to get some potential traction of movement forward.
I totally left that theater thinking exactly that, Steve, that they made more money than they expected to. So we've got a potential franchise on our hands. How can we turn this into, like I said before, how do we turn this into something that has legs? Now we've got a Scooby gang that has this kick-ass headquarters that they're going to work out of.
They have a lair.
They have a lair, they've done the perfect setup for now we can do these set piece movies about these amazing agents of I, and who are going to go out and do movies, that's exact in my head. I was like, oh, smart marketing team, or, good thought executive producers, this is where we're going now,
Yeah, it is funny because the end of the first one is like, now they're part of the eye. And then the second one, it's like, you're part of the eye, but we're still not going to tell you anything about the eye. You don't get to meet anyone else in the eye. It's still like this kind of weirdly obscure group. And you get to the end and you find, oh, of course, the people working the oldest magic shop in the world, part of the eye. So is the guy who, runs the vault, and like these random people pop up as, parts of the eye. And so it's kind of weird. But yeah, I guess now they're in the club and they get to go on adventures for the eye now in part 3.
Well, and that is really, I think, what this film exists to do, is establish the mythology, because it was not established clearly. That was a major shortcoming in the first film, and I think they were really working hard to create something they can hang their hats on later. And so maybe we'll look at this film entirely differently, in 3 years when we're watching Now You See Me 3, invariably doing this show without JJ.
Well, it makes you wonder, because something like The Matrix, they wrote, the Wachowskis wrote that with kind of a trilogy in mind, although they had to make it. And so often when you make a first film of the supposed trilogy, you still have to kind of make it as, okay, if it doesn't succeed, we still have to make it at least kind of stand on its own. It's not like it can be, part 1 of Lord of the Rings. And the flip side is when you make a movie like Now You See Me and you have something like The Eye, it wasn't really planned to be part of a trilogy. Now they're going to do that. Yeah, you have to go back, and now it is fun, I guess, for this new writer to come on board and get to invent this mythology. Although it does make me curious if the guys who wrote the initial film had an idea of where it would go, and if they actually ended up tracking any of that, or if Ed Solomon kind of got to do his own thing with this one.
Well, Ed Solomon was one of 3 writers on the first one.
Oh, he was on the
Yes,
first one.
Ed
Okay.
Solomon was on the first one with Boaz Yakin and Edward Ricourt, and so he has taken over sole writing.
Yeah, right.
I think this film actually shows that, right? I mean, it really demonstrates this feels much more like a single-handed, message. Like these were the things that were important to me in the first movie that I didn't really get to do much of. So now we're going to jam them all in here and see what happens. So, anyhow, let's blast through the cast a little bit, shall we? Starting with Jesse Eisenberg as Danny Atlas, Buffy the Chippy. How did he do with his new, vastly improved haircut? I love this. This is my favorite quote that he had when asked about how he likes playing this character. He says, "Well, it's just a lot better than playing characters who loathe themselves and make other people feel bad, which is most of who I play." And I thought that's really true. You really have cornered the market on that character.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you were pointing out, and with an eye toward building the mythology and trying to build these characters, he feels a little bit softened, perhaps a little bit more neurotic versus angry in this one. But because it felt more heisty, we don't see him really do a ton of tricks that feel magic-y. They're more heisty, so he does that when they're doing the Octo launch. He does all that quick change kind of stuff. But I thought all of his little neurotic twitches were mildly fun.
The thing for him with me is they set him up at the beginning as, this guy who's getting frustrated and he wants to take over the group, and the eye tells him they're going to, even though it's not really the eye, but they tell him, oh, you're going to get your chance and all this stuff. And that kind of story element kind of fizzled out. It seemed like it was a setup that had a really weak payoff. The fact that he wants to take over this group, and it never really goes anywhere. I mean, yes, he kind of has that moment where he tells Ruffalo's character, it's me now, I'm the one, or whatever. But I don't know. It felt like that never went anywhere as an arc for him in the course of the film.
Yeah, he had a much more, I felt, defined arc in the first film. This one, there were just a couple of moments where it's, he's continually knocked down, like he's playing the doctor. No, you're not really the doctor. You're Buffy. And then, trying to take charge of the group, and then seeing Mark, Dylan being the one to really step up and take charge of the team. I didn't really get a sense of that they knew what to do with his character in this one. He started off at the beginning. I thought we would get more leadership out of him, or more tension between him and Dylan, but there wasn't anything there that really happened with him.
I actually found that sort of endearing that, the first movie, it's all flash, right? And we get to see who he is on stage. And because we don't spend a whole lot of time with them off stage, understanding who they are as people, what we're left with at the end of the movie, of the first movie, is a character very much like the character we're introduced to in the beginning of the movie. And in this film, I feel like now that a year has passed in the film's timeline, and we get to see that this guy is not everything that he is made up to be. His personality is very much a magic trick of its own, right? It's misdirection. It's on the surface. He's got these quirks and these tweaks, and he can't really stand up for himself, and he ends up being Buffy the Chippy, and there is nothing he can do about it. And so in that regard, I really enjoy Jesse Eisenberg. He has a weird sort of magnetism for me, a charisma that I don't know if it's interested in, but certainly curious about in every film that he does. And so I found myself really interested in who he was in this film as a different character than who he was in the last. And I'm glad he didn't take over more officially from Ruffalo. I think that would have been frustrating.
I'm not saying that I am not glad he didn't take over. I just felt like that as an element that they set up had a really weak payoff. Like, I felt like they should have had more of a resolution between he and Dylan about that part of the story.
Yeah, no, I can see that point. But it's really Dylan's storyline, right? So they couldn't have split the storyline too big because it's about Mark Ruffalo's character's arc, right? That's the main arc that's happening.
I think so.
I think so.
I think they're
uncovering another central flaw.
Yeah, for me, Mark Ruffalo's character, he was the least interesting and the most frustrating character for me. I don't know. I just felt like he was just... I just didn't feel like he was quite connected to the story as strongly as the other characters, or maybe I just didn't get into him. I wasn't as interested in him. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but for some reason, his character for me ended up feeling like a weak link.
Because he's playing the same character he played in Spotlight, Andy. You don't know it, but you were bored in that movie too.
Yeah, his whole, holding a grudge for 30 years and having to, quote unquote, hit the bottom. Right? Yes, is right. Some bad writing right there. The long game, all of that history of how the FBI agent, heard him speak at the training, and she wanted to be him, and all of that kind of stuff. I do feel like it was a little bit cobbled together. I generally don't find the main character most interesting in a film. I'm not really sure if that's a disease that we can coin.
I don't think I have ever heard that. I generally don't like the leads.
I don't. I really don't.
That's awesome.
But I agree that he's not quite well constructed enough, and is he really is he going to be M to, the Four Horsemen's James Bond, like what role is he going to take going forward?
To me, at the beginning of the film where he's clearly working with the Four Horsemen, but he's still the FBI agent, I thought, you can't start a story like this where he gets it both ways. He's getting his case, he's there. He's going to feed the FBI false information. And then I even wonder, he's saying, oh, they're the Four Horsemen. There's something on the message boards about this Octo thing. I'm like, okay. So he's tipping them that. But then later on, it's like, oh, you directed all our troops to these other, all the agents to these other cities. So I thought, well, what?
Out of nowhere.
They didn't know what to do with this character. I thought what we liked about in the first film was, we could see later on he's playing both sides and what he's trying to do. But here, it felt like they just really didn't know what to do with his character.
So now I didn't think that because I thought that when that happens, when they show up and he's saying, but you've been directing our people elsewhere. In my mind, what's happening is the Daniel Radcliffe character and that whole piece of it, because they're now on to them and they're quote unquote in control and they're playing their card, that they're the ones who have been doing that. And it's catching Mark Ruffalo's character as off guard as anybody else.
I don't think the writing's that smart for this film. That's
fair.
Assuming a lot. Sorry. Because to me, his character just stumbled around, I think, as it got going, and we, again, sit him in a room with Morgan Freeman for 10 minutes and have them talk at each other, and we start to get what they want to do with this character. But early on, I thought I was glad to see that they turned the tables on the Horsemen right away. So clearly now their plan falls apart. They're on the run. I thought, okay, we've got to take them from a position of power and get that taken away from them to put them on uncomfortable territory. So I was glad to see that happen. But for so long with, Dylan's character, I just, because you've got the one agent who's like, oh, I think you're really smart, but you just play dumb and I'm going to be on to you. And I thought, where is this coming from? We haven't seen anything. You've just got, exposition being thrown out, without showing us anything. You've just got characters telling all this stuff. And it really just frustrated me because it was so much less. And again, a movie about magic that should be all about the show. There was too much telling.
I think that's a central challenge I had, Steve. You're describing the FBI stuff. Those were wildly underused characters, and it could have been a major storyline, maybe in another movie. Like I could have really dealt with a crime story, like even a procedural about trying to uncover who Ruffalo is on the force, and it's something that they never made good on in the first movie. And now, I agree with you. That was a weird thing to add in. They didn't need it. It ended up making it more messy. What about Woody? Woody plays twins, Merritt and Chase McKinney. Did we like Woody?
He was my favorite part, and I think it's just because he had those two characters that he played, and they were so different, and there was such a great. I just thought it was a brilliant way to expand on him as a character by giving him a twin brother. There's this weird animosity between the two of them, and I could never quite pin is he going to be the guy who's going to come in at the end as the guy who's actually on our side, or is he going to always be on the bad guy's side? I enjoyed that there was kind of that element of the brother with the animosity, and just the two of them. I thought, him playing those two versions so differently. I just thought he did a fantastic job. I think that was probably my favorite part of this film, is watching those two versions of Woody.
I always like the comic relief when it's successful, and for me, the comic relief there was, for the most part, really successful. And I would like to add that in the next film, if they keep those two characters, the two FBI agents, right, they'll be the ones hunting Ruffalo's character. They'll be the ones hunting Dylan, right? So there's that setup for the future use of those characters. But I laughed. There were plenty of times with Woody Harrelson's character that I laughed. So, and I like the comic relief. So, it worked for me for the most part.
To me, I don't know what it was, but he reminded me a lot of Matthew McConaughey's character in Tropic Thunder. I don't know if it was the hair or the teeth. And then I thought, well, maybe working together on True Detective, he just decided to pick some stuff up from him. But there was just something about that character that just had this McConaughey vibe to it.
That is uncanny. Now that I'm looking at that picture, Steve, it's uncanny. It has to be an homage. It has to be.
It was entertaining. I mean, they kept that aspect of the character from the first, because there were some great laughs, in the first film, and they with the hypnotism and all of that. So they kept that through there, and so they did keep that lightness. Again, to me, still not enough of it. I wanted more, but it was at least something that I found myself laughing and enjoying, and thought, yeah, this casting, this little gimmick is working. I'm going to go along with it.
I'm with you. I think the major fall for me, the big problem I had with his character is they let us hear his whispering, his hypnotism, and in the first movie they don't. It's always leaning in. It's always watching him whisper. You never know what he's saying to allow him to hypnotize people. And I think my hunch is it's letting us hear all of his words is akin to showing us the strobe lights for making the rain go up, right? It's pulling back the curtain, but it actually makes his power of persuasion less impactful for me, and I think that deteriorates his role on the team for me. I love the twin thing. I thought it was actually really quite funny, and I thought it was, every time he was on, I thought that was great. So how about Dave Franco, the younger Franco as Jack Wilder, the card throwing maniac?
He's fine. I remember enjoying him as much as I could in the first one, and I think he kind of fit the same bill in this one. I mean, I enjoy him. He's probably my least favorite of the group.
I liked him just fine. If they can work in a shirtless opportunity, I'm for that. I liked that they developed his character a little bit more. I liked the relationship that he had with Woody Harrelson's character, and God knows I hate it when they force romance in movies, but I at least found his romance with Lulu's character at least somewhat believable, whereas the whole crap about Dylan's, relationship, falling in love with the French chick, was just ridiculous in the first movie.
I totally even forgot about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Franco was lauded pretty universally by his castmates as the one who really got the magic, the sleight of hand stuff. He has a dexterity and an agility with his hands that allow him to do things that they really, really struggled to do, and he did them quite naturally. So I actually found that really, it made me enjoy watching him more, knowing that, and having seen the behind the scenes stuff where he's actually tossing these cards up, flicking these cards up and catching them in his mouth, and he's splitting bananas by throwing cards. Like that stuff it made his part better for me. So I actually thought he did pretty well. We got to talk about the Fourth Horseman, Lizzie Kaplan, Lula May. I already mentioned that we like the romance.
Oh, I didn't like it.
I think I heard you say you found the romance the central thing that you admired in the movie, that it was the most important, and that you liked it the most.
No, I'm afraid
the mostest.
That's not right. Perhaps Dave Franco's dexterous hands, maybe. I'm not sure, but
you're blinded by Dave Franco's dexterous hands.
Yes,
somebody put that on a shirt.
I found Lizzie Kaplan's performance in this film I almost 1,000 times better than Isla Fisher's performance in the first one. To me, she felt so not in sync with the other actors in the first film. At times I was like, what is she doing in this movie? Was she forced to do it? Did she her agent signed her up and she was like, oh, crap, now I have to do this movie. I found Lizzie Kaplan's, I don't know, just general chemistry with the group way more compelling than Isla Fisher. So I enjoyed her way more.
She was a very welcome addition. I wasn't quite sure initially when she came in, because I really I had so many problems watching the scene when she shows up in Atlas's apartment and is it's like she's Nightcrawler and she's bamfing around the room. It just got so silly to me that she was never there when he would turn around. I'm like, oh God, this is just as bad as the first one. But her character ended up being another of my favorites. As much as I enjoyed Woody's twin, I was so enjoying everything that she was doing in the film, especially like her bit when she rags on Dylan for assuming that she's the one who doesn't know how to ride a motorbike. That was a fun little bit. And she felt like she fit this group of these Four Horsemen so much better than Isla Fischer did.
I think she's got a scene with each of them where she's basically showing off, you think you know me, but you don't. Because she's got that scene with Jack, a little sort of romantic scene, and he talks about, his past troubles with girls, and she's right. Basically like, she's like, oh yeah, and she's lifted his wallet, his belt, whatever peanuts great. Out of his pocket. But yeah, don't underestimate me. She's constantly, showing you're underestimate. You don't know what I'm capable of, and I thought that was really fresh. And I was hoping, and maybe I didn't stick around for the end credits, but I'm hoping it's out there of her pulling the hat out of the rabbit trick, because I would really love to see that.
It was not at the end of the credits, I'll tell you that.
Oh, it was not. It was not. I really like her, this whole geek magic vibe with the head chopping thing, and hearing her talk about that gag, like how they actually drop her into the couch. Like they built that thing. There was no CG. They built that thing so that when the guillotine comes down, she drops into the couch, and thus is the trick. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't quite mind the bamfing, the Nightcrawler bamfing about the place, but mostly her charisma on screen was fantastic. That she was such. She was just egregious in her following of Dave Franco. It might be helpful to picture each other naked. Like, I was in stitches every time she was doing something with Franco. I thought she was just great. Okay, so the Radcliffe. Daniel Radcliffe says, hey, it's nice being a British bad guy. It's very exciting. I feel like it's a rite of passage, he says, which I think he's very charming. What do we think of Daniel Radcliffe as Walter Mabry? I
liked that he was such a jovial bad guy. I didn't. I guess I didn't really have any problems with him. I didn't. It wasn't like a huge surprise or anything. Oh, he ended up being Michael Caine's son. Anything like that. Like, nothing really blew me away. But he was just, I don't know, he was just so fun. He seemed like he was genuinely having a good time making this film. And so I guess I find him such a compelling person to watch that for me, I just kind of went along with it, and I thought he was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed his performance too. I like how he didn't wear any shoes a lot of the time. But I also found I found it charming. It was easy to watch. It was believable enough to be believable, I guess. And all of his quick tete-a-tetes and his sort of, snarkiness worked for me.
He brought to that character what it needed, which was that, I'm wealthy, I'm powerful, I've got this ego, I think I'm in control of everything. Even at the end, it's like I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix this. He's got this sense of he's a guy that's used to being in control, and I thought that worked very well.
As much as I would like to talk a lot about Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine, I'm not going to, because I think that they were really, really poorly used in this film, especially Michael Caine. It was really frustrating.
Oh yes, as I said earlier, I didn't need them in the film at all.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't bug me that they were in the film. It felt like, unlike the olden days when they'd make a sequel, they could hardly get anybody to come back. Now it's like they get everybody to come back. So I guess it's just no surprise that they had everybody and more. Just as that's the way it is. So it didn't surprise me. It didn't bug me too much. I guess they were there.
Well, and maybe it was already spoiled. I don't know if it would. I'm usually not sort of swayed by these kinds of announcements. Oh my gosh, Daniel Radcliffe is playing Michael Caine's son, but Michael Caine had spoiled it like a year ago, and said, "Oh yes, I'm Daniel Radcliffe is my son in the next Now You See Me movie." So it wasn't a big surprise. It wasn't a big secret, and so I thought Radcliffe did just a fine job as the bad guy, and I could have been okay with that. Okay, so Getting It Made, global production. This is one of those that was part of a deal between Lionsgate and Hunan TV to co-produce in partnership in China. So taking it to Macau is, premeditated. Let's just say that. It brings in Jay Chu, who is a major Chinese star. He is the grandson in the magic shop and member of the Eye, and it gets them shooting on location in Macau. I thought it was actually quite nice visiting Macau, the Las Vegas of China.
I loved Macau, and actually I loved the way they ended up there. Like, that for me was, I don't know, I guess in my mind, I liked that sort of magic trick in this film so much more than the giant bubbles in the first one. Like the fact that they go down this tube and they wind up in this Chinese, in the laundry baskets for a Chinese restaurant, that was really fun. And I guess those are the elements that I appreciated in this film more so than the first film. And they explain all of that. It all makes sense. I bought into it. And Macau it's a beautiful place to go film.
What I liked about that was that, at the end, those characters are feeling what you're supposed to be feeling for the other stuff, right? They're shocked and don't understand how this could possibly be true and all of that kind of stuff, which is what you would hope as an audience member, as a magician, you as your audience members are thinking the same thing. Like, oh my God, how could this actually happen? I don't understand. So I appreciated that nod anyway to that emotion. My problem with Macau is that the scenes, other than the pan shot of, beautiful Macau with its pretty lights and all of that kind of stuff at night, the street scene, the scene in the shop, all of that looks like a soundstage to me. Could have been in Macau, could have been in London, could have been in LA, could have been anywhere. It didn't look, except for some random street scenes where clearly, because people are waving at the camera and all that kind of stuff, they did film in Macau. The set pieces look like set pieces.
Well, and I guess that's look at Skyfall. It's kind of the same thing. They're in Macau, but, they go into the big casino and the big dragon at night, and it's like, yeah, it may as well be a set in London. But, I don't know. I guess I still like it. I like the sense that it feels that way. The
cinematography is by Peter Deming. Peter Deming is very much a David Lynch guy. He did Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks, but most importantly, he did Joe's Apartment, which was the great film about friendly dancing cockroaches with Jerry O'Connell. Who's with me on Joe's Apartment? Am I right?
You say great with quotes around it, I'm sure.
There are no quotes in anything I just said, Andy. None.
That may explain our issue with some of the faster-paced action sequences, because you look at David Lynch, you don't get a lot of fast-paced action sequences. You get a lot more deliberate, slow action. So that may be where some of our issues arises from the cinematographer and how those scenes were shot. I don't know.
That is interesting, and further look at Stan Salfas editing. He has a healthy split between TV and film, but his big action film of late is, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is, a much, it's a big thing, but these kind of close-up, fight scenes maybe also not quite his style, maybe much more epic and not quite as up close. I don't know.
Good point. And he shot Oz the Great and Powerful too, and I'm trying to remember if that had any big action sequences that I could compare. I just can't recall the big action.
I think there was some big battle at the end
there was the big thing at the end where she turns green.
I've largely blocked that movie.
I think all three of us have not revisited that film in several years for good reason.
I think this is one of the the thing I walk away with is cinematography and editing together. These are the hardest jobs in the room on this film. From what I said in the very beginning, showing magic on screen inherently makes cynics of the audience. I think because we automatically believe it's faked. And I think to be able to do that well is a real challenge. And for the most part, I really enjoyed what they did in terms of how they portrayed the close-up hand magic. And one of the things that Ruffalo said in one of the interviews is we did a lot more magic in this movie than we did in the first movie. My response to that is it sure didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like there was as much magic or more magic than in the first movie. But what was portrayed on screen, I actually really liked. And I am, the more we talk about it, the more of a fan I am becoming of the complexity of the vault sequence. It might be overlong, but it was really beautifully articulated.
Well, I think that one of the reasons why it doesn't feel like it is one, we've all been, if you saw the first film, you have this expectation that it wasn't real. Right. So you already in your mind, you're like thinking that it's not real. And secondly, I think what Andy mentioned about the first scene when Lula May comes on, is that even if they did build and perform a real magic trick with the breakaway, place in the couch underneath, because they don't show it, and maybe that's why in the end they did start showing or explaining how they did a fair amount of the tricks, is you don't, and then she does all this, magic disappearing where, she's faster than the speed of light. Even if that part is real, because the other part feels so fake, you just assume that it's all fake. You know what I mean?
Fair. Yeah, absolutely. That's the uncanny valley of on-screen magic.
Yeah.
I think it is.
I mean, I did think the water droplet scene was pretty.
It's really cool.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
But again, that was one of those things where they set that trick up in the magic shop and you see the little strobe, thing. I'm like, okay, so that's how it's done.
Right.
But at the end, and obviously it's in such a huge scale that they couldn't have done it realistically for real.
With real strobe lights.
With real strobe, right, to make the actual thing happen. But at the end, it's just so clearly CG that it's just like, okay, I mean, that's that uncanny valley. It's like they're setting it up, the reality of it, but then they kind of, in a way, kind of spoil it by doing the CG of it.
That's curious to me. That's one of those I'm going to let hang out there, because my assumption is like yours, Andy, that it is so obviously CG, and there were quotes in that same sentence. But I'm leaving that out there. I have a feeling that there is a non-zero chance that I'm going to watch a behind the scenes on the DVD when it's released, on the Blu-ray when it's released, and they're going to show how that was done and how they did it, and a minimal use of CG in it. Non-zero chance, minimal use of CG in that sequence. I think it's doable.
Okay. All right.
You heard it here. Because I know it's possible to do more than a string of things. I mean, I can set up enough strobes that are synced to make a larger scale than just a single droplet of water look like it's a strobe and look like it's going on. I know how to do that technically, photographically. I know how to do that. To do it on the scale that they did it, I'm saying it's hard. I get that it's hard, but I'm not saying it's impossible.
But I don't think that's what Andy is saying. What I think Andy is saying is that even if they did, which I agree with you, they possibly could have, because they have him fall through the water at the end.
Yes, that's where they blow it.
That's where they blow it. And sure, so if you were now explaining like, well, they could have had a trap door and they could have, had him fall through, to have it timed perfectly, had a thing in his hand where he pushed the button and he falls through the water and somehow magically the water doesn't follow him down below, or, that explanation, then you're hooking me more.
But that is not plausible, because he's standing on brick in the middle of a major public area. There's not plausible that happened. I would not believe.
Well, and he somehow magically comes out of his shirt, like that.
Yeah.
That I'm not buying.
Had they panned up, there would be a naked Eisenberg running down the streets of London. That's what I wanted to see.
Yes, I would have been for that. Maybe it would have been Franco. But,
all right. Music on this one, Brian Tyler did this one. You know what? We got into it a little bit recently about the woeful lack of themes in movie scores. I've been listening to this one throughout the day today. There are some really nice themes in here.
Yeah.
I find myself humming them.
Brian Tyler's score actually is the one thing that really stuck with me from the first one, and I have the soundtrack to that one, and I really enjoy what he did there. And I think he does a great job of expanding on that here.
Oh my God, I didn't even notice the score except for the Asian rap, which I love.
That was good too. All right. Have we sufficiently exhausted this? Are we ready to get to the important part? Head over to flickchart.com/TNR Film Board, everybody. If you do that, you will see our account for all of the films that we have talked about over the last how many years on this Film Board show. And when you get there, what you're going to see is you're going to search for this movie, Now You See Me Too, and you're going to say, add this to my Flickchart. And then Flickchart's going to present you with Filmo a Filmo, one movie against another movie. You got to imagine yourself on a desert island with only two movies. This movie, Now You See Me Too, and one other movie, and we're going to rank them one after another. We'll do this about 10 times, Alice. And then we're going to see where this film ends up on our list of all of the TNR Film Board films. So it is not a challenging concept once we get into it, but it is liable to give you to throw a clot once we get to films that are particularly hard to rank next to one another. So get ready. Our first film, Now You See Me Too. Andy?
First one we have is The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey.
Well, I'm going to jump out there and say I'm going to pick Now You See Me Too over The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey.
I'm going to say The Hobbit.
I am going to side with Andy, and I am going to say The Hobbit.
I too will side with Andy and say The Hobbit.
Then it doesn't matter. I don't matter. I'm devalued. Thank you all.
Next up, Now You See Me Too or Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit.
Oh, this is fun.
Wow.
Which one do you
Oh
hate
my
more?
God.
I'll say Now You See
okay.
Me Too, if only for Woody's twin.
I agree.
Oh,
I agree.
Wow.
Definitely.
agree.
Yes, definitely Now You See Me Too.
Yeah.
So, Steve, it doesn't matter, but...
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter. But yes. I'll take Daniel Radcliffe as a British villain over Kenneth Branagh's bad Russian.
It was so bad. He just was not... man, so many problems with that one. Now You See Me Too or Godzilla. The 2014 version.
We're talking about the... right. This is
where
we've
only-
done this one, yeah.
Where Ken Watanabe is the only person allowed to
Gojira.
say Gojira.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm Now You See Me Too over Gojira.
I don't know.
I have
how
to-
excited I am.
Andy, you loved Godzilla, big monsters. Big monsters. Come on. You're with me on Godzilla. Big monsters. The Halo drop sequence, the beauty of that, the music.
All I
Yes,
can think
there's
about is how
problems
much
at
I
This
hated,
lobbying. I've had enough of this lobbying, Sarmento.
I hated the guy, the kick-ass guy who's...
Yes. Oh, he's
horrible
horrible.
in
Yes.
Godzilla.
Yes. It's true. But big monsters fighting each other. Rawr.
I don't know. Where are you falling, Alice?
I have to abstain as I have not seen Godzilla.
Oh, nuts. Well, then I guess so.
So it really...
Oh,
is down
it's
to
you are the
then.
tiebreaker. Yeah.
I was hoping to get some help on this one, but I guess not.
Sorry.
That's all right. Geez. I mean, if I had to pick between the two, I probably would pick... I feel like I'm going to pick Now You See Me Too.
That's
Which
right.
kind of surprises
That's right.
me.
You are. Let it go. Move on. Let's
That's
click,
all right.
click it and
I
do the
can
next
see
one.
that.
Stop talking.
Okay, well, here we go. Now You See Me Too or The Bourne Legacy. Number
Born
4.
Legacy. That's
Wait,
the
That's the third one?
That's the
No,
fourth one with
that's the
Jeremy
one with
Renner.
Jeremy Renner. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'll still go Born.
Yeah, I will too.
Definitely Born Legacy.
Now You See Me Too or Cloud Atlas, everybody's favorite mess of craziness.
Now You See Me Too.
Oh my God. I'm going to have to go Now You See Me Too as well.
That's the spirit.
Oh.
I'm going for the craziness of Cloud Atlas.
Oh.
Wow. Wow.
It's because you're a
I'm
Tom
learning-
Hanks
I'm
fetishist.
learning
That's
such
right.
important
Oh,
things
wow.
right now.
That's right.
I'm leaning to Cloud Atlas because it didn't make me as angry with the plot holes. I agree, it's a mess, but there's so much potential in Cloud Atlas.
Yes, there is.
There's something fun in that ridiculousness. Whereas this one just the plot holes you could drive a boat through, or I should say, plot holes Lizzie Kaplan can levitate a boat through that we don't see.
She doesn't need to because Bird's in a jacket.
Yeah,
Oh
birds
my
in the jacket. Yeah.
Because Franco's nimble hands. Come on.
I think
right.
this is a tie.
Yeah,
It's
we got to
tie.
do a Rochambeau.
All right.
Oh,
my
no.
God.
All right. I'll take it for our team because Alice is new.
Thank you, Pete.
You're welcome. But next time it's on you. Who's
All right, you
up
ready?
for team whatever your movie? Cloud Atlas.
Do you want to do it, Steve?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll do
Here we
it.
go.
Okay.
One, two,
Two,
three.
three.
Scissors.
Rock.
Ah.
There you go.
Ah.
Man.
All right. Next up, we have Now You See Me Too or Flickchart's Thinking again. Come on, Flickchart. Okay. Now You See Me Too or Divergent. I am definitely Now You See Me Too.
Uh-huh. Now you see me.
Yeah, Now You See Me Too.
That was before we stopped doing those movies.
That's
Yeah.
right. We never quite finished that series.
No, there's a reason.
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Well, that leaves it at number 29 on our list.
Wow.
29 out of 47.
All right.
Wow.
There you go.
Watch some bad movies.
You know what? To
We
be
actually
fair,
have a lot of bad movies.
There's a lot. So it ranked higher than the first one.
Correct. The first one's
Yes.
like 40.
Like 42 or
46 or 40 something.
Wow.
Yeah, 46 out
Yeah.
of 49, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, we really hated that. I don't.
We
you
sure
know?
did.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I
Oh,
would
you
rank
guys
that one
did. I
differently.
listened to the podcast. You guys did.
Yeah.
Where does this put us on our Letterboxd ranking? If you're going to do out of 5 stars, you'd give it how many stars?
3.
Solid 3 stars to open the bid.
2 stars.
2 stars. Andrew?
I think I'm at 2.5.
2, 2.5, and 3. I'm gonna go with 2.5 to make the math easy.
Okay.
How's that?
Fair.
Thanks for your logical reasoning too.
There you go. My emotions are all based on math.
That's so funny.
this-
So yes, that's
good.
great. This is
There
a
we
nice
go.
2.5. Perfect.
All right. So this is a great conversation. Where do we go from here? What's our next film board film? Speaking of,
I think it's Bourne.
it is.
Don't we have the Bourne film?
That's right.
Jason Bourne.
That's right. Jason Bourne, Matt Damon's return, shirtless and thugging. So that's next month on the film. But we've got some other things coming up. Andy, what's next?
Next up we have our listener's choice episode for The Great Escape coming out later this week, and then next week Steve's next trailer rewind for Mr. Nobody is going to be.
That's
hitting
right.
it
It's
Tuesday.
It's we finally, Pete. We're doing one of your trailer picks.
Oh, I'm so
You
gratified.
know, we found a film.
You had to
that
go
you
all
picked
the
as a
way
trailer
back.
to November 2013 to find something that we wanted to watch. That was actually, you pick a lot of films that end up on the film board, like Child 44,
Which also end up terrible. Thanks, Steve. That's good. You're not hiding that from anybody. So we've got that coming up, and we do have our next series on the next reel. Main show is our vacation challenge. This is where Andy and I go on vacation, and we challenge you to listen to these shows. We've given ourselves a challenge. I was tasked with finding a great stop motion film. We'll be doing Paranorman, and Andy was tasked with finding his favorite end of the world comedy, and he has in fact chosen Dr. Strangelove. So those are coming up later on in the month. That should be a lot of fun.
I've also got a little 3 of a kind
Oh,
I've been working on.
Did I
I've got
skip
a
you
little-
again,
That's
Steve?
okay. It's been a work in process. It's interesting because it's about the creative process. And as I was pulling this together, I came upon a theme of where I was going to tie together creative process, looking at the head, the heart, and the hands. And then I listened to your Metropolis discussion where you guys talked a lot about the head, the heart, and the hands.
Oh.
So
It's like it was meant to be.
it was meant to be.
Oh, very, very much look forward to that. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. And Alice, thank you so much for joining us. What do people have to look forward to over at Educating Geeks?
Well, we just finished recording 3 live podcasts at Phoenix Comic Con where we talked about Labyrinth, which is enjoying its 30th anniversary. And we always do American Horror Story. It's a tradition for us. So we talked about Hotel. I personally did not participate in that one because I don't really do horror. However, for some reason, I got lassoed into talking about Penny Dreadful, which I'm, whatever. I'm not
Who's
sure
the
how that
dummy
happens. I know, right? Oy. But so those will, I believe they start coming out next Friday, and they'll run, I think it'll take us about 6 weeks to get through all of them.
Oh, goodness. Lots to look forward to. It's fantastic. And where do you like people to subscribe the most?
Probably through SoundCloud or Stitcher. And you can also, the easiest thing is to go to the site and you can listen to it there. And there are quick and easy to find subscribe here buttons all over the site. So pick the one of your choosing and join us.
Outstanding. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on the show, as ever. Andy, it's a treat.
Always. We'll see you next week.
Steve, great to hear your voice again.
I think I'm going to go lock myself back in that safe after this film.
Probably a good idea. And Alice, I hope you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely. This was a blast.
Awesome. Just what we wanted to hear. Ego stroked. And we're out of here. Thanks, everybody.